Well, we kick off this news hour with a developing breaking story for you. Federal prosecutors in the United States in the last hour or so have arrested and charged a former senior White House strategist. He's Steve Bannon. He was one of President Trump's most influential advisors during the 2016 election campaign. The Justice Department is accusing him of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. It has to do with a fundraising campaign to support the building of Donald Trump's wall along the border between the U.S. and Mexico. Live now to the heart of the story, the White House, and our correspondent there, Kimberly Halkett. Kim, hi there. So, Mr. Bannon, what does this mean?
Well, what this means is that he could face, along with his associates, up to 20 years in prison. These are not light indictments that he is facing. What this is an allegation, a very serious one at that, that this was nothing more than a scheme, an online scheme to fund lavish lifestyles under the pretense of building the president's border wall, that donors, grassroots donors, often donating very small sums, thought that they were giving money to participate in the construction of a wall. But instead, what the indictment says is that Steve Bannon and his associates then created shell companies, phony invoices and phony vendors in order to funnel the money to themselves. So this is certainly a serious indictment. At the same time, this is another problem for the U.S. president, given the fact that this is yet another member of his inner circle that has been charged with very serious crimes. You'll remember his former campaign manager, Paul Manafort. He was, of course, convicted of unrelated fraud charges. So this is something that the president will have to explain. Now, at the same time, Peter, we should point out that Steve Bannon was only in the White House for about 7 months. There was a falling out, particularly the president pushing back after Steve Bannon sharply criticized his children, particularly Ivanka Trump. The president very fond of her, Steve Bannon calling her dumb as a brick. So no love lost between these two men. We're waiting for the president, who will be meeting with the Iraqi prime minister very shortly. That's why you see the color guard behind me. We expect that he may have something to say about this indictment of Steve Bannon, his former chief strategist.
Let's talk about that visit of Mr. Kadhimi, the Iraqi prime minister. Where is that relationship at the moment?
Yeah, well, there's a sort of an interest in this in the United States as well as from Iraq, because there's, again, no love lost between the United States and Iraq when it comes to the fact that it's been 17 years now since the U.S. invaded Iraq. A lot of people, not just here in the United States, but of course also in Iraq, don't really want to see U.S. troops inside Iraq. And that's really what the focus of this meeting is going to be about, the future of those U.S. troops there. Of course, we know that inside Iraq that there are many, particularly Iran-backed factions, that do not want those soldiers there, particularly after the U.S. and its drone strike that killed the Iranian commander Qasem Soleimani. So while they say that this is going to be an opportunity to talk, these two leaders, Donald Trump and also the Iraqi prime minister, about economics, culture and education, what they're really zeroing in on is the future of U.S. soldiers there. The U.S. is going to make the argument, we want to keep them there a bit longer as a deterrent to Iran. And of course, as Iraq is a major oil-producing nation, the U.S. has interest there as well.
OK, Kimberly, we'll come back to you, and we'll also come back to that news conference that we understand is going to kick off in the next few hours. Bruce Fein is formerly a U.S. Associate Deputy Attorney General. He joins us on Skype from Washington. Bruce, great to have you here on the programme again. So, Mr. Bannon, what's your big takeaway point on that?
Well, I think it shows that the idea that Mr. Trump and his associates were going to drain the swamp was just another piece of hypocrisy. It's not just Mr. Bannon in isolation. The entire Trump administration is filled with characters, including the president himself and his family, who have employed government and their prominence in order to profit personally, whether it's selling trademarks or merchandise or attracting foreigners to attend hotels and things of that sort. So the president set the standard that's pretty low. Here, it was rather raw. He just looted a fund that was purportedly created to build a private wall with Mexico, which was, again, building off of a Trump initiative, which the experts say will do nothing to diminish illegal immigration, and then turning that endeavor into a private profit-making venture for Mr. Bannon and his co-conspirators there.
Okay, is there potentially here, however, a huge political problem for the Trump administration? And it's this, you know, Roger Stone is a free man. We've seen people involved in illegality at the beginning of, or at the end of the campaign, the beginning of the presidency, and they in effect have walked away from the tariff that they had to pay. But this legal process will straddle the US election. Of course it will, and maybe the inauguration by several months, because we're, what, 10 weeks away now, 9 weeks away from November the 3rd.
I would agree, but I think that the public now is almost jaded by the wrongdoing of the Trump administration. I don't know what additional increment that the Bannon arrest provides. I think when we spoke this morning before the arrest, most people would think it was a corrupt administration. Paul Manafort is just one instance, but you had Scott Pruitt and many members of the administration who had to leave under ethical clouds, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the Secretary of Labor, Mr. Trump himself being sued under the Emoluments Clause. He's got his private communications secretary promoting Ivanka Trump goods, with White House property. All these illegalities are so rampant. There already was a cynicism built in, and I think although Bannon arrest and indictment adds to it, I don't know how much the increment is. It already is an administration that is tainted by 3.5, almost 4 years now of using government for private enrichment.
Okay, when we talk about private enrichment, your area of expertise, Bruce, is basically things that are legal and illegal, and in that area also finances or illegal financing of schemes such as this one. We're talking here about a fund that reportedly, according to MSNBC, was worth $25 million. Surely there are checks and balances. Surely if people put money in or take money out, they've got to run it through a firm of accountants to say, can we do this? At which point somebody says, no, you can't, because that's illegal.
Well, that's true, but here apparently the scheme was they just created phony invoices and then paid themselves. It's the same kind of thing that we've seen in adjacent organization, the National Rifle Association. It's a very inbred, incestuous situation where people are policing themselves. They're not going through proper accounting standards and end up turning the what's supposed to be public investors into just tools for their own enrichment. And I do think that's what we had here. They just invented invoices, fraudulently created them. That's what Roger Stone was famous for, too. He would invent polls and all sorts of things in his dirty tricks campaigns. And I think this is going to be a very clear-cut case of they just stole the money. It's just a little more sophisticated than Willie Sutton stealing money from banks.
Bruce, share with us your thoughts as well. We understand in the last hour or so, Mr. Trump has gone to court. He's appealing against what's going on with the taxation story. Will that go in his favor or will that go against him?
Well, I think the tax issue is going to go against him. It's a usurpation of the congressional authority over taxation. I don't think that he doesn't even have the kind of authority that he hopes would increase the actual salaries of those who would so-called defer their Social Security taxes for an indefinite period. I think it's a huge, huge flaw. It was a gesture that will show a cynicism where many people are suffering with COVID-19. He's basically preaching, it'll go away on its own. Don't worry, in the short run, I'll try to give you a few extra dollars. But I don't think that's going to pass muster. I think his effort to shore up the COVID-19 failure with these small efforts, illegal as they are, will be politically worthless to him.
Okay, we must leave it there. Bruce Fein in the States. Many thanks.
Thank you.